Okay, ladies and gents, students and non-students and young people and old, I am here, Dr. Annette Feravich. I'm not here live. I don't like not doing this live. I don't know why. I just feel like you're here and I see people pop in and out and it makes me feel good when I see people. I don't know why you're here. I don't always get likes. I get a bunch of people out there who are spend time giving me dislikes. Seriously? I'm teaching a classroom. What could you dislike about this? Honest to gosh, they disliked my reading room. When you think about what you could possibly not have having going on in your life, do you understand what I'm saying? What could you not have going on in your life that you would give a dislike to the reading room when I'm reading you a story? What kind of hate-filled heart do you have? And filled with miserableness. Oh my gosh. A teacher reading me a story? What? We'll have none of that. Dislike. Dislike. I know what I dislike. I dislike not doing this live because then I go off on my tangents thinking, who's paying attention? Only me. But eventually, hopefully, more people. I can't even load these videos up. I'm trying to load the videos up and I can't. So I'll spend the day recording and thank you, $92 a month that I pay, and I can't even get online to tell you that I have a bad signal. Can't even do that today. I wrecked my coffee because I put too much sweetener in it. Ugh. And it's weak besides. I am not a happy camper today. But and the shame of it is I was getting a bad signal yesterday when I just thought this classroom, the Bookless classroom, I am Dr. Annette Feravich, and we are here in the Bookless classroom where you don't need. I have got to get adjusted here because this really bothers me. Like when it's not. I mean, come on, seriously? Can we not? There we go. There we go. Much better. Okay. All right. So as I was saying, where are my glasses? We're here in the Bookless classroom and no need for a book, as we know. But if you want one, if you want something, piece of paper and a pen is a good idea. I always try and take you down some not rabbit trails, because rabbit trails get us in trouble. They actually do. They really do, because we go down these things and we don't decipher whether or not the information is true or not true. We're just like with big eyes in a rabbit hole. So we don't go down rabbit holes, but we do investigations or deep dives. And there's always lots of room in this Bookless classroom to do deep dives. Number one, because you don't have to read any books that I'm giving you. I'm reading them to you if there's a book. And I forgot to bring the new books that I am so excited about. And so we could tell you. So I will tell you what is going on and what is coming up. And let's finish our day. But I was so excited at the end yesterday about reading all at one time for you, because I had highlighted the parts of George Washington's speech, but I read them not together, right? So I read it sometimes, highlighted, went back to it, highlighted some more, read a little bit more, and you'll see, if you were to look at it, you could see the ending of his speech didn't get any highlights. I read some of it. I had, plenty of highlights in his speech to read to you, and they were so inspirational. So make sure that you see yesterday's as much as you can. But again, the signal kind of wrecked it, which is really sad, because I happen to think that the people who do not want me to succeed are people who are very traditional conservative Republicans. And it's really a shame, because I really am teaching people exactly what you want them to know. And as I said, and I want to make it very clear, that I don't want to hear anybody talking about democracy here locally or in our community or neighborhood, talking about national politics when you are preventing democracy at a local level, when you are preventing the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, I don't want to hear about your Second Amendment rights when you can't even give me my First Amendment rights. And this is happening, at an astounding rate locally. And so and this is, an extremely conservative area that I know are smart enough to infiltrate uh, democratic ideas and muddy them up. What happened at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission? They sent me all the paperwork. They said we're going to file the paperwork and then get online and make any changes to the paperwork. And guess what happened? The paperwork is gone. Or they closed the case. They closed it. The paperwork's there. They closed it. They closed it. Just exactly like they do with my Fiverr accounts. And again, what you're working against is democracy. And we don't need you here in this country at all if you're working against democracy. I talked about it in a different class. I think it was President Biden who took away the communist oligarchies' land that they had here, just repossessed it. If you are working against democracy, I happen to know that there are really people in our government that really are working against you. Okay, there's a book, Gina Perry. I put that there because it was on top of everything, but I don't mind you seeing it. This is what we're looking at in the philosophical classroom. Awesome stuff in the philosophical classroom. I pulled another book off the shelf because I was looking to see if any John Adams speeches were available to me readily. I have a lot of information on John Adams, and I think that I have enough information on him without a speech. Although, again, I think as the father of our country, of my country, of his country, George Washington's farewell speech and what he stood for was just an amazing, amazing speech. And even though I think that the video was chopped up yesterday, so that was episode number or classroom day number 26, it may have been chopped up a little bit. The words are all there. My video doesn't look so great, but that's just the way it's going to be. And just get the words of his farewell address, because what he does, he is so humble at the awesome responsibility that the citizens of the United States gave him, and that he had hoped desperately that you would remember all of his efforts, although he believed that he had many shortcomings as well. But then again, talked about the being a Federalist, and so much of his speech was about the unity of the United States. And so we really, if you didn't, that would be a place that you might want to read the rest of his speech, maybe. So you might want to do a deep dive there if you want to, or a little investigation if you want to there. But I just think also, if you were to chew on what I gave you in his speech, that would be really give you the essence of the kind of man he was. Very interesting, because so I was looking up again to see if John Adams had any speeches, and I have this book. I've had this book for years, haven't read much of it at all. It's interesting because it's really not speeches. It really is more of parts of speeches or famous sayings. And so I looked up John Adams, and I didn't find John Adams. I found Samuel Adams. Samuel Adams is John Adams' cousin, who he revered and admired. So John Adams, president number 2, admired and revered his cousin, Samuel Adams, who is the Sam Adams. The Sam Adams. Very interesting individual. I do not want... It's not because he was a representative at the First Continental Congress, so a very important person, but very much a rebel and representing poor people and dressed that way. So he was not they said he was not a rags to riches story, Samuel Adams. He was a riches to rags story. Okay. So a very interesting character. And so I'm looking up John Adams and his speeches, and I find Samuel Adams. In all of my reading that I'm doing, I find that John Adams revered Samuel Adams. Everyone loved Samuel Adams. Well, you know, the maker of a beer, you might, if you have that kind of reputation, everybody might like you. In fact, it was implied in one of my readings that the reason why John Adams was so successful in international foreign affairs with France was because they literally thought he was Samuel Adams, which seems to me that they had very different personalities because people didn't like John Adams. Opinionated and not always having the opinions of other people. The rebel kind of a person that Samuel Adams was without the charisma. So kind of hard to imagine that people thought John Adams, our second president, was Samuel Adams, who seemed to have all of this charisma. And there's a little insinuation about CIA there since he was so mysteriously unknown but known. So if you wanted to do a deep dive, an interesting deep dive would be to do one on Samuel Adams. And I do not have my glasses right here, and so I can't read anything to you, not even this little quote that's here. Although I could figure it out. But there's a little bit more there about Samuel Adams. So hold on just a minute. I'm going to be right back, okay? I'm back. I put some lipstick on too. Somebody said if you have lipstick on, you look like you're made up. Do I? Do I look like I'm all made up now? Did you notice a difference? Okay, so let's get back to what we're talking about. Ready to get my glasses and read Samuel Adams, right? Read from the beer guy. But it's interesting how I did read a little bit more. I don't have it with me because he's important to Massachusetts. I think he might have been the governor of Massachusetts. So here, on hearing the opening rounds of gunshots at the start of the American Revolutionary Wars, Adams is reported to have made the comment below, which is, "What a glorious morning is this." He had been an active participant in the build-up to fighting, taking part in both protests against the Stamp Act of 1765 and those surrounding the Boston Tea Party in 1773, which also John Adams was also an activist against those things as well, in which he was a leading player. In 1774, Adams was selected as one of Massachusetts colony's delegates to the First Continental Congress in Virginia. So remember, that was where they were starting to write the Constitution, if you remember that. After the war, he wanted to keep as much control as possible within each state rather than with the federal government. Now, that's kind of interesting because John Adams was a Federalist. So John Adams was exactly the opposite. So where was I? After the war, okay, there we go. Partly because he distrusted and disliked George Washington. That was why Samuel Adams was a Republican, a Jeffersonian Republican, was because he disliked and distrusted George Washington. His cousin, John Adams, was George Washington's vice president, and John Adams revered Samuel Adams. So on this basic concept of government, a Federalist, which was George Washington and John Adams, I've talked about that in past episodes, right? It means that they believe that the federal government should really have the choice in most matters because people aren't educated enough on the matters. And admittedly, I am not. Does that mean I want to give up my vote? Well, if the person voted like me, I would, right? If it were my family member, if it were my husband, if it were somebody who voted like me and knew exactly what I cared about, I would say, yes, look over the matters and then vote for me. Absolutely, I would. Wouldn't you? Right? Isn't that what the delegates would do? And then I wouldn't have to worry my pretty little head about those matters, right? And I don't want to. I want to be a teacher. I don't want to have to worry about whether or not this shyster is getting in compared to this hooligan, compared to this mafia guy, compared to this union lord, compared to this, white supremacist, but compared to this, I'm thinking complete atheist is what I'm thinking, to the extent of the Musafer Sharif robbers cave stuff that we've been studying in the other classes, right? So that's the problem, is that these people seem to rise to power because they're power hungry and money hungry. So that's what they rise to. And we want to just teach or something really nice like that, plant flowers, hug a effing tree without somebody criticizing me because I want to hug a tree. Oh my gosh, let me hug a tree. Can I hug a tree without you like, oh, look it, she wants to hug a tree? Whatever. People have written poetry about trees. So whatever. How about write a poem? At least I'm not writing a poem about a tree. I simply hugged one. I think it was Robert Frost. I don't know. I'm not sure. Somebody tell me. Or was it a woman? Begins with an A, E? Yeah, her, that poet. Emma? I don't know. All right, so First Continental Congress. After war, he wanted to keep as much control as, all right, we already said that, because he disliked George Washington. That just is so interesting to me. So very much on the bottom line issue, the big issue right there in Congress, same issues as today, federal government, too much control, federal government or states, too much control, and they are dingbats and wishy-washy. I mean, look what's going on right now. It is true that states will do whatever is in their best interest, whether or not it is in anybody else's best interest. And a best interest for a state is making money. Whether or not, so they'll do that in the best interest of the state, just like Thomas Jefferson owned 600 slaves and was, selling tobacco out of, every area he could possibly sell tobacco out of, and looking the other way. Okay, he helped write our Declaration of Independence. He wrote our Declaration of Independence, but we're going to find out John Adams actually had probably more to do with our Declaration of Independence. If we ever get on with this classroom, we'll find that out. Okay, we're still on Sam Adams, and we haven't even really finished up George Washington. What the heck? Seriously? He strongly advocated this model of government during the negotiations that led to the formulation of the Articles of Confederation. And so if you remember Articles of Confederation, that is the first draft of the Constitution. And then what? George Washington and John Adams said we need a new Constitution because that Articles of Confederation did not provide for taxes, for defense. And there's no way to unify those states without a unified defense for those states, right? What was his quote? His quote was, "What a glorious morning this is." And that is when the first shots were fired. Now, when the first shots were fired there for the American Revolution, that was the Boston Massacre. And what ended up happening in the Boston Massacre was, if you remember when we first talked about this, we talked about who fired the first shots when we read the story of Valley Forge. And it was debated who fired the first shot. Well, this actually was a bigger case than that. And what ended up happening was that the British were brought to trial by the Americans. And at trial, they were freed. And there, so here again, you ended up having, so this split in right here, even in America, with, you know, going to war and fighting this, and they killed us. But if they were doing it in the name of war, right, which is what they were doing, is that really a massacre, right? If people like Samuel Adams was says something like, what a glorious morning this is, after the first gunshots are fired, was Samuel Adams part of instigating that those first shots fired, right? So a lot of as we were saying, a lot of hearts burning. That's what a lot of envy and burning hearts over the misrepresentation of facts. That was, and I'm paraphrasing, but go back to yesterday's episode, because that was a quote from George Washington. I just said, so he first saw, he had such vision, if you ask me. I think, I mean, even when you think about his skill in battle, only going so far to Valley Forge and not being pushed further west, because he would have lost the momentum of the colonies, been distanced from the colonies, and then been forced into Indian territory. I mean, he just really just had a lot of vision. And as he said in his speech, he wasn't perfect, but that he had so desperately hoped that we would remember what, you know, what he the spirit of what he wanted to give his country, the father. He is the father of his country. So yeah, I just can't get over what I've learned about George Washington and what a wonderful man I just think that he was. And so it was very interesting to me, and I couldn't find any information at all on why Samuel Adams distrusted and disliked George Washington. It could have been because he was a statesperson, but it says here that he was a statesperson because he disliked and distrusted George Washington, and that's why he wasn't a Federalist. It was because of George Washington. If you're a Federalist at all, you have to trust the people who are going to make those. Just like I said, who would I turn my vote over to vote for me? My husband, right? I would have turned easily turned my vote over to my husband. You know, after a conversation, I had to make sure that he had his head on straight, as we always do. That was turning your head on straight. That's what that was. Okay, all right. So we went into Samuel Adams, not even on the agenda. Whatever. So that was one of the books that I pulled off the shelf that I've had for a long time because I couldn't find a Samuel Adams in our biographies. Right? So the biography of George Washington was here. And I can't remember. I didn't read this one, though, to you, did I? No. Or did I? No, because I read it out of... So here is from the biography book, the biography of George Washington. So if you remember, this was one of the books that I got. And I didn't read you that. I read you the biography of Christopher Columbus. That's what I did. The biography of Christopher Columbus. Right? Didn't I read that to you? Yes. Yeah. So we read the biography of Christopher Columbus. We read the story of George Washington, or some information, because I read through a lot of different books, and I find that some books obviously are better than others, but not the whole entire book. So there was no speech in my... So I read the profile of Washington out of this book. Even though I have 3 books on Washington, this is where I read the profile out for Washington. But I got the speech online, right? Because I didn't mark up this book, and then I realized that his full speech probably wasn't in here. George Washington's full speech wasn't in here, probably in here. I did not have a chance to look that up for sure. But I still love this book, and now that's not the full speech. I'm going to highlight what I want to highlight because it's not the full speech anyway. All right. So it's a great book, but maybe not sacred. Anyway, but I do have, drum roll please, building up to, I think I did that yesterday in this class too for some of the books that I had too, is 2 books that I did get that I ordered the 4 books. So I ordered 4 books. I said it ended up being $60 because I don't have Amazon Prime anymore. $14 a month? I don't think so. So I don't have Amazon Prime anymore, so I had to pay like $20 in shipping, which, all right, that really stunk. Not quite $20 in shipping, but still, it kind of stunk, but okay. What did I get for my money? And these were, again, so $60 for 4 books when I paid a total of $46 at the library for over 100 books. Easily over 100 books. You'll be seeing them. You saw many of them already. Excuse me. You saw many of them already. I'm going to clear my voice. But there, I had 100, right? So you have to go to the different classes too to see all of them because you didn't see some of them that I did show, right? I said many of them already. This book has a copyright of, look at this, California. So this is one of the books that I ordered. It has got a copyright there, if you can see it, of 1944. And interesting, I don't know why they had to have so many of these book records when nobody was checking the book out. One person in what? Raymond Bond. Raymond Bond. Sounds like James Bond, doesn't it? Checked it out in, look at that, check it out, 1952. Doesn't it just feels like you have a piece of history, like there's a little boy, just Raymond Bond, writing it down. And actually, he didn't write it down. The teacher was Ellis, right? The condition is good. And so after I get through these presidents, I'm going to go back to California. This is a long book. Now, it looks really, really short, doesn't it? And how many pages does it have? It doesn't have page numbers on it. Oh, yes, it does. Sorry. They're stamped on it. It's weird. Let's see. It's stamped on the last page. That's it. So 24, I don't know, maybe that is a 24. Maybe it's not the pages. But so it looks like a very short book, but the pages are not every page, but there's a lot of writing in here, right? And there's a lot of beautiful pictures in here as well. And so these are lithographs. They are copies of lithographs. So a lithograph, I don't know exactly what it is. It's a certain kind of way that they print, but I don't know exactly how it is. So it was a way that they printed things, a specialty kind of printing that looks like this. And so when we're going to get to California next week, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to take a break in the presidents, as we said we would, and we're going to finish up our United States. Here I have got another book that I bought. Look at this one. In perfect condition, right? In perfect condition this book is. So it's called Hurry by Jerry Stanley, African Americans in Gold Rush, California. And I started reading it, and it's so good. It's so good. Because you really do. And once again, what I would like to say to all of you out there who ever listen to me, and that's this. If you want a job, I happen to think as a teacher that we need people who are Black historians writing books, Black people who are Black historians. I think we've got white perspectives of Black history. I think we need the Black perspective of Black history in our middle school and children's books. I have had a really hard time, and this book was written in 2003. Okay, seriously? That's when we're starting to get books on Black history and the Black movement in 2003. Let me make sure that that's true. 2000. But guess what else I have here? I'm being so careful with it, with clean hands and everything. Right there, what does that say? First edition. I got another first edition. I'm so excited. Although my other first edition I don't think is a first edition. Is it? I don't know. But I feel like this is a first edition, and I am so excited about it. I mean, the pages are beautiful. The print, see how on the presses and first editions, the presses, see how beautiful that print is and how crisp that print is. That's what a first edition can get you, from my understanding. It's like the first, printing on the press is what it is. And then they could have, like a second edition and then a first printing on that press as well, but it's a second time. Second press roll. This is from the first press roll. And it's beautiful. And the pictures are beautiful in here. And so it starts this story with this Mifflin Gibbs. And so it's his story. And then what I'm saying, we could use these from the perspective of a Black person, not a white person, because they actually do have experiences that would be part of, like, so here is a well-educated, self-educated Black man at a time when they didn't even believe, or there was movements to demonstrate that Black people could not even learn, right, to the same capacity, did not even have the same capacity. That was the movement of the bell curve, the first revolution of the bell curve, actually, in the 1930s and 1940s. And about how they were barred from hotels and restaurants and segregated in hospitals and even in cemeteries. Even as a dead person, a dead Black person, you had a different spot in a cemetery. So if you didn't live it as a white person and told the story, those are the details that you could easily forget or gloss over or not have been exposed to. But if you lived it, you always had to figure out. When Gibbs went shopping for canvas and ropes, he was asked to leave 3 different stores before he found one that would sell him the items. When he used public transportation, he was forced to ride on the outside platform of the omnibus. I mean, wow. An everyday life, everyday experience from a person. You talk about an injustice, right? You talk about an unbelievable injustice. And again, the hard time. I bought this book to find out more about California. So there were so few books available about California. There was one out there about for missionaries, if you grew up in whatever. And I didn't get it. But this book here, covers the missions that were at and the reasons for the missions, because I didn't think about it. California has got such a bad reputation right here in Michigan. Oh, California, all those, liberal Democrats, especially here in this, just totally off the charts, conservative, fascist thinking, white supremacist area that I live in. True that. but how we didn't talk. I haven't heard, or it's been a long time. I grew up Catholic, so that's when we heard about those Catholic missionaries in California. But since then, I haven't heard about them. I completely forgot about the missionaries that were in California. So we're going to talk a lot more about California. But let's get to it. We got some things to get to. But that actually gives me some really good background for you guys on what we're talking about. And that giving you that background does help me get through these slides a little bit more quickly and, and generously in a way. And what I mean by that is that I can be generous with the information, more of the information. The Treaty of Paris. Now I put that up here because it was. I'm trying to give you a little bit more background again, and I just love that picture. I love that picture. But the Treaty of Paris was a critical. As we are talking a little bit, it was John Hancock who once again had some skill in international relationships with France in particular, and was key in getting us the Treaty of Paris. And the Treaty of Paris is the treaty that ended the American Revolution, right? So declaring our independence in 1776 set off the American Revolution. And what ended the American Revolution was the Treaty of Paris. Why was it called the Treaty of Paris? Because America and England came together in Paris and decided on the final treaty, the final peace document for how to end the war, right? A treaty is a peace document typically used for ending a war. So Americans, John Adams, met with the English in France for the Treaty of Paris. Now, England was also fighting with France and Spain and somebody else over there too, but I can't remember who. So this Treaty of Paris was just not for our English colonies, the American colonies. They were for Europe. Because remember, we were talking about that which was the First World War. And I won't be able to find it because I don't have those slides up there. But in my old slides, I talk about the very First World War had begun right before we declared our independence. It was all part of the same movement. England was colonizing countries, and they're like, hey, get out of here. Stop with all of your taxing and all of your laws that we don't want to follow. So we were one of many countries that were pushing back on English colonization, on English rule over the earth. So why is it called the Treaty of Paris? It's called the Treaty of Paris because that's where we went to, John Adams in particular, went to in order to decide what we would all agree to end our first war, the American Revolution. Now, this is the reason why Washington in his speech is saying, stay out of foreign affairs. Look at what happened across all of Europe, and it's divided, and there will always be conflicts. And so, given that there are always going to be conflicts, we only need to concern ourselves with the problems here at home, not with foreign affairs. And this, again, is what many of the right-wing Republicans are screaming. Although they have flipped in that, because why? Because they're making a lot of money in foreign wars. That's the reason why. Why are we not holding fast and true to what Washington had hoped for this country? Because Vanguard and BlackRock and State Street are all making money at war. And that was what Washington was trying to guard against, is that it can be attractive, especially financially attractive. And for many other reasons, it can be very attractive. Washington himself said, let us spread, that he had hoped that we would spread the word of democracy to every place on the planet, that they would love this system and these words so much that they would apply those words, that democracy, to their own country across the planet. That's what he had hoped, right? But not by conquering. Washington said, pay attention to our own problems that we have here, right? And as we know, in politics, there's always compromise. And some of the compromise people didn't like, because Washington and Adams seemed to want to keep war at bay. And know, as a military man in particular, Washington knew the problems or the fallout, the trauma that war can create. Remember the story that we read of Valley Forge, right? And those men out there in the wintertime without shoes, right? So he knew the trauma and the sacrifice that military men had to make, especially during times of war. He was not a warmonger. We have warmongers today. Why? Because they don't go to war. That's why. They make money on people going to war, but they don't go to war. And that's this whole idea of make soldiers out of the 98%. That's not the top 2% or the 99%. Make soldiers out of them, right? Clear their minds of any worries that they have, make soldiers. So this is the whole bottom line of Federalist versus state parties. There at the bottom, what are those blobs? Those are stamps. Those are stamps. And that was the Stamp Act. Remember the Stamp Act, where they were taxing every time somebody put a legal stamp on. Those are stamps there. What do? They have wax, hot wax, and everyone for their signature didn't sign necessarily, although they did, right? There's their signature on there. On the top, there's their signature. But then they put their seal. That's a seal. And a seal oftentimes is on a scroll as well. So you would tie the scroll up, and then somebody would put a seal on and send it to somebody else. If the seal was broken, you knew that that paper had been read by somebody else. That's why they put the seal on it. Can't be broken. The seal can't be broken. So they use hot wax. I have got my own signature seal there. And put it in the hot wax. And that's what those are. Those are seals for, I'm going to blow it way up, for the individuals who signed that Treaty of Paris. I thought they were pretty cool looking when I first saw them. I'm like, oh, that's pretty. Look at those roses on the bottom of the Treaty of Paris. Of course there's roses there. No, it's not roses. Those are seals is what they are, okay? And not seals like, seals like, I seal this with a kiss. Kind of like that a little bit, but in wax. So I guess it's not like that. But you know, it's a promise, right? You seal something with a kiss, it's a promise. That's what that is. The seal, my signature. That's a signature in wax is what that is. All right, move on for Pete's sake. Now, what I wanted to talk about was, and I can't remember why I was thinking about the Northwest Territory, but there was a reason why I was thinking about the Northwest Territory, and I'll probably get to it in a minute in my mind. Oh, hold on just a minute. I have to do a little Treaty of Paris. Treaty of Paris gave us the Northwest Territory. Now, you've seen this map before, except for the states and configuration that is on the right there. I overlapped that on the map that you had seen before so that you could clearly see the Northwest Territory there. So that was acquired from the Treaty of Paris. Now, on to the right of that, you can see the colonies. But one of the interesting things about this picture that I have of the colonies is that the states there, so take a look at Georgia. All right, if you take a look at Georgia there, just above Florida, all the way south and then all the way to the east, Georgia, in the gold color there. Just to the left of it, it says seceded by Georgia in 1802. Okay, so that is, and so that is, I'm thinking that's got to mean given up by, right? Seceded by. So what that means is that once was part of Georgia. Just above that, it says seceded by North Carolina, submitted as Tennessee in 1796. So North Carolina gave up that area. It was part of North Carolina. So everything to the east of that Northwest Territory that you see was part of the original 13 colonies. They just didn't look like the states that we have today. Now, very early on, almost likely in classroom number 1 or number 2, we said that those 13 colonies didn't look like they do today. But I brushed over that. I didn't have a map. I didn't see how it used to look, so I just brushed over it. Well, there's the map for you right there. So the part to the west of Georgia was part of Georgia, which would be what? Mississippi. The part to the west of North Carolina, Tennessee, used to be part of Tennessee, or North Carolina. And you can go up the coast there, and you can see from that picture, I'll blow that picture up again for you. You can see from that picture how the new states were created from the larger states or colonies that we had earlier on. And then you could see all the way to the west of the Northwest Territory that again was acquired from the Paris Treaty. And that's Wisconsin, part of Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. And I think part of Illinois as well. So all of that was acquired from Britain after the American Revolution. You can see just to the west on that map, that's the overlay, it says Spanish possession. That is also of Florida there. West Florida and East Florida was divided there into West and East Florida. It is the same color as what is the Louisiana Purchase later on, right? That was owned by the Spaniards. In the American Revolution, France ended up getting, or during this First World War, France got that area that was part of the Louisiana Purchase. France owned it. So France got that from Spain and then sold it to us because they were looking at possibly losing it in the World War to England. All right. So look at how are you getting all that? Are you getting all of this? I know. Well, we've got 27 classes that it took us to get to this point, to get us to a better idea of what's been settled. We still don't have California, and we still don't have the story of the slaves. Here, I also decided to put, because I just loved our little route of our Lewis and Clark expedition, starting in where? Starting in St. Louis, Missouri is where they started. So I kind of put there, I didn't know exactly, and I kind of put a sort of I saw the route and I drew that route on there. So there is the route to the Northwest, which is how we ended up acquiring the Oregon Territory. Why? Because Great Britain didn't care about it. And that ended up happening with California as well. There was so much of the West that people that basically claimed it as their own, Spain, for example, and even the English colonies, they weren't overseeing them. They didn't have people here to govern them. Spain didn't send kings and queens to govern these areas. And so what ended up happening was they were lost. They were lost to whom? They were lost to the explorers. They were lost to our explorers. So what wonderful American stories that we have here. For sure we do. Okay. And that was the original expedition. I wanted to leave that up there because I drew this on this map here, but I do think that I mimicked the original expedition that I have here that I got from Encyclopedia Britannica there online. All right, so we talked all about George Washington. The only thing that I did not get to was that there was, oh, you know why I didn't get to it? Because I deleted it from here. That's the reason why. Was a poem, and I did put it in the links below. Now, this is a poem called His Excellency General Washington by Phyllis Wheatley, and I think I have that picture. Yeah, there it is. Because I was talking about slavery issue. Oh, that's where it is. That's where the link is right there. So, and Phyllis Wheatley got special treatment from George Washington basically because she wrote this poem about him, but also there seemed to be like so the idea here, what I'm talking about, is issues of slavery, right? Issues of slavery, and how Washington seemed to have a greater concept of equality with those of African American descent than, for example, his wife Martha Washington did, or than many of the other presidents did. Thomas Jefferson, for example. John Adams, if you recall, I did say this, John Adams had 0 slaves. So very few people, I think, who was the other one? Alexander Hamilton, maybe, didn't have slaves. I'll find out, though, as I go through the presidents, so I don't want to misspeak. But John Adams had 0 slaves. So somebody who really stuck to his beliefs, so true to his beliefs. Maybe that's the reason why Samuel Adams distrusted Washington, because he had slaves. That could possibly be the case. I bet it is. Since he was a riches to rags kind of guy, I bet it is. So let's take a look at, I'm going to read the poem that Phyllis Wheatley, 1753 to 1784, and got special treatment from Washington. And also, I think in that way, probably helped Washington to open up his mind about the disparity between blacks and whites, when there was really obvious examples that it was simply out of convenience that people thought that black people didn't have the same capacity as white people. It was simply out of convenience because, remember, they really were also at a time where you would not have expected black people to be able to rise up, that black people were rising up at a time where they had no advantage at all to rise up. We see that black people were rising up, which demonstrates a great capacity, and that the only reason why people believe that there wasn't that capacity was simply for convenience, the convenience of slavery. So let's go ahead and read this poem to George Washington. It's called His Excellency General Washington by Phyllis Wheatley. Celestial choir enthroned in realms of light, Columbia's scenes of glorious toils I write, while freedom's cause her anxious breast alarms, she flashes dreadful in refulgent arms. See Mother Earth her offspring's fate bemoan, and nations gaze at scenes before unknown. See the bright beams of heaven's revolving light involved in sorrows and the veil of night. The goddess comes, she moves divinely fair, olive and laurel binds her golden hair. Wherever shines this native of the skies, unnumbered charms and recent graces rise. Muse, bow, propitious, while my pen relates how pour her armies through 1,000 gates, as when Aeolus heaven's fair face deforms, and wrapped in tempest and night of storms, astonished oceans feels the wild uproar, the refluent surges beat and sounding shore. Or think as leaves in autumn's golden rain, such and so many moves the warrior's train. In bright array they seek the work of war, where high unfurled the in the ensign waves in air. Shall I to Washington their praise recite? Enough thou knowest them in the fields of fight. Thee first in peace and honors we demand, the grace and glory of thy martial band. Famed martial band was started by John Adams. Famed for thy valor, for thy virtues more, hear every tongue thy guardian aid implore. 1 century scarce performed its destined round, when Gaelic powers Columbia's fury found. And so may you, whoever dares disgrace the land of freedom's heaven defended race. Fixed are the eyes of nations on the scales, for in their hopes Columbia's arm prevails. And on Britannia droops the pensive head, while round increase the rising hills of dead. Ah, cruel blindness to Columbia's state! Lament thy thirst of boundless power too late. Proceed, great chief, with virtue on thy side. Thy every action let the goddess guide. A crown, a mansion, and a throne that shine with gold unfading. Washington be thine. Oh, I don't even know what most of that means. I don't even know what most of that means. I don't, but I wish I did. When I took an English class, the English comp class, so English comp 1 and 2 in college, the professors who were teaching the class, English comp 2, right? So that was literature. And so I got really great literature and an appreciation for really great literature, but I couldn't understand it. I mean, that's a gift for somebody else. It's not a gift for me. And I loved the idea that somebody could write something that had such hidden meaning and somebody else could read it and understand it. It was almost like talking in tongues to me, right? You didn't understand that poem. I didn't understand that poem. It's like writing in tongues, but somebody else can interpret it for me. I wish somebody would. Maybe you can. Maybe you can put your interpretation in the comments. I'm sure that there are some literature wizards who know, because there seem to be some hidden meanings there, and I wish I knew what those hidden meanings were. What a great poem, though. What a great poem. What a great title. What a great ending of that poem. So what great respect. And it seems admiration and even love that she had for George Washington, which makes you wonder about their relationship, doesn't it? Okay, so the issues of slavery, we talked a lot about that here and there. So some things to think about, right? No judgment here. We report the history, but again, 40% of Fairfax County, which is where George Washington lived, which is where Mount Vernon was enslaved. And remember what I was saying yesterday in all that choppiness, it was part of an economic system, right? There were the Crusades, there were the Spanish Inquisitions, where individuals for religious purposes used violence to get what they wanted. But as far as work trafficking, which is what slavery would be, work trafficking, in order for me to get the most out of my workers, even if they are enslaved, right? Home, food, education for your children. If you were able to work as a slave, right? As a slave in a mansion for Washington, imagine what your lifestyle would have been like, right? And maybe like me, you would have loved to take care of those kids, a teacher, right? Being a teacher, you would have loved to teach those kids. So how would that have seemed like it was slavery to you? It was part of an economic system. It wasn't until slaves revolted from their bad treatment. And the bad treatment came because of why? Because Washington was going in debt taking care of his slaves. So if that's the case, maybe your rewards so that I don't go in debt get lesser and lesser, and it becomes more of a aggressive, violent interaction relationship than it ever was meant to be or used to be, especially when you think about biblical times. Okay? All right. Good stuff, I think. Let's see what else we have that we can kind of hopefully go through a little bit more quickly. Martha Washington lost her 4 children. She had 2 with George Washington, and she had 4 with her first husband, which is Custis. So her first name, Martha Dangridge. I can't remember right now, but it's down below, I think. Custis Washington. So her maiden name is Custis, and she had 4 children with her first husband, but she lost 2 of the children very young, as well as she lost both of her husbands. So she lost her first husband, and George Washington passed away before Martha Washington did too. So she has known a lot of trauma, a lot of sadness, a lot of great loss in her life. Let's look at that quote though. What does it say? I am determined to be cheerful and to be happy in whatever situation I may be. For I have learnt from experience that the greater part of our happiness or misery depends on our dispositions and not upon our circumstances. We carry the seeds of the one or the other about with us in our minds wherever we go. The seeds of what? Of our dispositions, happiness or misery. So it's interesting, right? And then there you have got her perspective on slavery, which was much more of an elitist view than her husband George Washington had. However, she did emancipate all of her slaves. She freed all of her slaves at her death as well. So Washington freed all of his slaves, but they did not account for all of the slaves on Mount Vernon. Martha Washington freed all of her slaves upon her deathbed as well. I just think that that is really tremendous when you have 40% of the population enslaved. So you've got to have 100% of the population or close to 100% of the population that are for slavery, right? Maybe John Adams was the only one that wasn't for slavery. So let's get to John Adams. That's a famous quote of his. I loved that quote because we are standing in the crosshairs of losing our liberty. And once it is lost forever. So when you give up your democracy, your right to vote for an elitist power, do you think that that power will give you that right to vote back? Yeah, fat chance. Okay. John Adams served from 1797 to 1801, so he was a one-term president. In his second term, he ran against Thomas Jefferson and lost against Thomas Jefferson. They were very close friends. However, they had very different viewpoints in politics. Jefferson was a Republican, a Jeffersonian Republican, which was a statesman. He was more for states' rights. As we have said many times, George Washington and John Adams were Federalists. And so John Adams, when he became president, his vice president was Thomas Jefferson. And here you had 2 individuals with very different viewpoints of politics. One being a Federalist. So it'd be like a Democrat and a Republican. It'd be like a Republican president and a Democrat vice president, or vice versa, right? How would those 2 get along? And that's what ended up happening. So it was very difficult. But during election time, what they had was a president of one. The president was the person who got the most votes. The vice president was the person who got the second most votes. And the second most votes went to Thomas Jefferson of a different political party. So very difficult. It put a rift in their friendship after Thomas Jefferson won the election. So, and John Adams did not win a second term, right? So they had already started the precedent set by Washington, 2 terms, right? So he ran for a second term, but he lost his second term to Thomas Jefferson, his vice president. It put a rift in their relationship. But after a number of years, his wife Abigail got him to write letters. Abigail, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson were avid letter writers, but especially John Adams and Abigail Adams, Abigail Smith was her maiden name, were avid letter writers, and they have over 1,100 letters that John Adams and Abigail Adams wrote back and forth to one another. And it goes to show also, and other people had commented on the strength in their loving relationship. So, what a wonderful story there, I think, with John Adams, and somebody to look up to. Um, let's see here what I also don't have there. First president to live in the White House. I was going to read the story of the White House, but I am not going to because I read it from the Cornerstones and I didn't find it to be all that interesting. It is just a story like any other story, where it was difficult to get it built. Did they have the funding? John Adams got to live in the White House for a short time. Let's see here. But it was actually, I'm looking something up for you that I forgot to put on my PowerPoint. And now I forgot what I was saying. Let's see here. Oh, but it was actually Thomas Jefferson who lived in the White House. But Thomas Jefferson, living in the White House, he was like, oh, this is way too much for me. But he loved it. It was the same thing with slaves. He didn't talk about slaves. I'm thinking Thomas Jefferson might have been a little bit of a hypocrite. But we're coming up. We're doing California before we get to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, president number 3. So we're not getting there quite yet. And I think we're going on a little bit long for this classroom, but that's okay. Then I'm all caught up with what I wanted to get caught up with, and we can go on to California and not worry about it. All right. So I can't record live, but I do have a little bit longer presentation for you than I normally do. So kind of a little bit of a treat, I suppose. Okay. So we'll find out a little bit more about Thomas Jefferson's personality. It seemed like John Adams was not a hypocrite. He really stood by his convictions is what it seems like. And that's why, but he didn't seem like he came across with a lot of charisma. So people didn't seem to like him that much. And that's probably likely why he didn't win a second presidency. He entered Harvard University at the age of 16 and he graduated as a lawyer. So he became a lawyer. He organized the committees of 5 that drafted the Declaration of Independence. And in fact, he actually is likely the most responsible for the Declaration of Independence because he advocated that being a official document. So you might say, all right, yeah, we are going to declare our independence from England, right? We're going to do that. Or you might say, Mom and Dad, I'm going to declare my independence from you. I'm going to be emancipated from my mom and dad. All right. You're going to say that. Well, you could say those words, but then, come and go. There's got to be rules to it if it's really going to work. If you're serious about being free from your parents, then there's got to be rules to it. And it's, okay, you don't get any money from us anymore. You live on your own. That when you visit, you have to call before you come. You can't just walk in the house, right? So there has to be rules. Well, the same thing. You can declare your independence from England, but unless you set the rules for your Declaration of Independence, we will no longer be subject to, and we will govern ourselves, right? So, and officially declare you no longer govern us, and it's an official document, then it's just a lot of words. So the official document declaring the independence actually can motivate the English to then take what is theirs, to start a war, to take back what is theirs, right? So we would not have declared our independence without John Adams because he is the one who, although Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, it was John Adams who also helped, part of the 5, put the committee together and as the sort of leader of the committee, ensured that this was an official document. Okay. He was the father of the Navy. He was also the father of the Marine Band. So the first Marine Band he started as well. And the last point that I have there is that he never owned a slave. I think that's pretty good for John Adams. Abigail Adams was married to John Adams for 54 years. They had over 1,100 letters written between her here and her husband, John Adams. They advised one another on federal matters. So she really did help him. And not just advice. When you think about a wife or husband, just like I said earlier, I would allow my husband to vote for me, but it would be after some conversation about what our real strong beliefs are. Because voting on these kinds of things really do bring out our strongest beliefs, right? It's like we said, when and then jealousies and misrepresentations that bring about heart burnings. That's what George Washington said in his farewell speech, right? So women were really, when you think about it again, we really share as a husband and wife a lot of those strong, deep beliefs. And so we would influence one another. And she did. She was a descendant of the prestigious Quincy family, and their son that they had was named John Quincy Adams. So, and their estate was, I think there's no E in that Quincy. And their estate was where they lived they were born, Adams was born in Braintree, Massachusetts, which is Quincy, Massachusetts now. So their family name is given to even that town. One of two women to be wife and mother to a U.S. president. So both her husband, John Adams, and her son, John Quincy Adams. He was fourth president, I believe. I think. We'll find out pretty soon. I've got the book right here. We're going to find out right now is when we're going to find out. So we know Thomas Jefferson is number 3. What happened here? Oh, there we go. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison. James Monroe, and then John Quincy Adams. So, they should have these numbered here. Now I have to count. 1, George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. Then what did we say? James Monroe. Yep. The fifth president. They have fifth president. Oh, duh. John Quincy Adams. Sixth president. It was right there underneath my nose. Okay. All right. So, husband John Adams, sixth president, her son, John Quincy Adams. And the other one? Who was the other woman? Do you know? Barbara Bush. George Bush. George W. Now, I am going to read the biography of Benjamin Franklin, and we did everything that we needed to get done today. I'm so happy. I don't know when it's going to get uploaded, since I can't even upload my early birds classroom. Look at what else we're going to be doing, too. Thomas Jefferson. I'll read that Thomas Jefferson biography. Coming up after what? After California. We might hit California all week next week, because we might talk about slave movement as well. And then we'll get back to the presidents. Thomas Jefferson. Can hardly wait, right? Okay, so Benjamin Franklin from my first book of biographies. Okay. 1706 to 1790. And since we are kind of wrapping up our, colonial times, I thought it really was probably fitting that we gave a little bit more of a nod to Benjamin Franklin. I mean, after all, he is on our $100 bill. Hats off to you. Washington got the $1 bill. but it's used a lot. Benjamin Franklin, 1706 to 1790. He was a writer, painter, scientist, inventor, and leader. Sounds like a real man. Born in Boston, Massachusetts, Benjamin Franklin was the 15th child in a family of 17 children. I did not know that. Did you? I did not know that. How about that? 17 kids and you were number 15? How in the world did you ever call somebody, like if you called them from the outside, because there was a phone, because Benjamin Franklin, was with Thomas Edison inventing the phone. No, I don't know. Or Bell, Alexander Bell, not Thomas Edison. No, he was lightning though he was. Hey, come in here and hold this kite, right? Or come out here, Billy, James, Judy. I don't even know. How would you even call those kids? How could you possibly call Benjamin in when he's child number 15? Wow. He went to school for only 2 years, but he read enough books at home to educate himself. When he was 12, Ben went to work in his brother's print shop. At 17, he moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where he found another job as a printer. In time, Ben Franklin owned his own print shop in Philadelphia and became a publisher. A publisher is someone who prints and sells books, magazines, and newspapers. Franklin published a newspaper and a yearly book called Poor Richard's Almanac. That was our first almanac. In the almanac, he gave advice such as God helps them that help themselves, and early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. So some of those statements that we have said, that maybe you don't even know anymore, that we used to say growing up all the time, they were written by Benjamin Franklin in that almanac. And that's why people bought the almanac, to get his words of wisdom. Franklin helped Philadelphia by starting a library, a fire department, and a school that became the University of Pennsylvania. I did not know that either. And when we talk in our critical thinking classroom about Martin Seligman, after this classroom, our critical thinking classroom about Martin Seligman, he is at the University of Pennsylvania. That is the big wig I talk about for positive psychology. And it was started by Benjamin Franklin. Awesome. Though he owned a few slaves, he became an abolitionist and wanted to abolish slavery. That's an abolitionist. An abolitionist is a person who was actively trying to abolish slavery. He helped Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence, which explained why Americans felt they had to fight the English for independence. Franklin helped America win the Revolutionary War by getting the French to fight against the English too. And that's how we also got the Louisiana Purchase. Benjamin Franklin also liked to experiment. Once he flew a kite during a thunderstorm to see what would happen. A flash of lightning struck the kite and went down the wet string to the key at the end. Anyone who touched the key felt an electrical shock. From this experiment, which is dangerous, don't try it, Franklin invented the lightning rod. He also, so a lightning rod attracts the lightning to it so it doesn't hit something else, right? Doesn't hit your field or the cows or your, Aunt Betsy or something like that. That's why we have lightning rods. Let me see here. Franklin invented he also invented bifocal glasses and the Franklin stove so that people could cook inside and eat their food inside. They didn't have to cook over a campfire, right? In 1787, at the age of 81, Benjamin Franklin helped others write the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution begins with the famous words, "We the people," and describes the U.S. government and its basic laws. We've read that book. We've read that already. So there we end that early part, our first two presidents, with a little history, a biography on Benjamin Franklin. Thank you. I'm sorry that you couldn't join me live, but I will have this posted up. I will probably maybe have to run to the library and then use the library internet in order to upload these. I don't know, because I can't get them uploaded. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and I am the teacher, and we are here in the Bookless classroom. Why? Because you don't need a book in this classroom. I will talk your ear off. Thanks for joining me.